Step number 10, get closed. And of course, this is my favorite, right? This is the real where the rubber meets the road, where you're going to get that contract signed. All right. So when you're in a negotiation and you're ready to go, and this really goes throughout the entire process, every seller lead that you speak to fits in one of three categories. And sometimes you don't know which one it is, but I'm going to review them so that you start to understand. Number one, they're completely unmotivated, i.e., they have no problem, no urgency, and therefore we can add no value to them whatsoever. Number two, they're motivated and want or need to sell now. These are something we call laydowns, right? These deals require no sales or influence skills, which means the first wholesaler who gets on the phone with this person wins the deal, okay? Anybody can do this. Now, by buying this course, you're not going to get any more laydowns, but it will make you a much stronger negotiator and get much larger deals, right? Change that $10,000 assignment to a $50,000 assignment, okay? So again, remember, anybody can close a laydown, but use your skills here to get bigger deals, bigger spreads, and have more confidence. Now, number three, this is the moneymaker, right? This is where our company will destroy the competition, and now, okay, you will destroy the competition. These are the people that are motivated, but they're sitting on the fence, okay? These deals do require sales and influence skills, and everything that you're learning right now, okay, this is the step to design to get those sellers off the fence to say yes. All right, this is really where the rubber meets the road. Now, if you're wondering what kind of difference this can make in your business, let me point something out to you. Let's say that you spend $3,000 on mailers, and you do one $10,000 deal from a really motivated seller. Okay, that's okay, right? That means that you're making $7,000 before you pay everybody else. But really, you're not in this business for that kind of spread, right? You're really looking to make $30,000 to $40,000 for every $3,000 spent. Imagine from that mailer that you're able to convert just two more contracts, right? That is going to live in that third zone. Okay, they're motivated but sitting on the fence. We're going to really start to flush this out with objection handling and some of the skills that you're going to learn. Now, this is really exciting because this stuff can change your business and really change your life. All right, so once you present your offer to a motivated seller, the conversation can go one of two directions. Number one, they decline, in which case you'll define and overcome their objection, and that's your mindset, right? You are going to overcome objections. You're a conversion machine. You're out here to help people and change lives, and you offer a valuable service. Or number two, they accept, in which case you move on to the close. Either way, both work for me and should work for you. Now, here's why sellers object. We all have a natural fear when it comes to making a major financial decision, okay? So most sellers delay making a decision by objecting in one form or another, right? Sometimes laydowns don't do that, but most people are going to have some kind of objection. And guess what? This is even going to sharpen your skills, even to get better spreads on the laydown. Now, it's important to recognize that the seller's first objection usually isn't their real objection. It's merely a stalling tactic so they don't have to make a decision right then and there. For instance, the seller says, I want to think about it. Or maybe they'll give you a price negotiation, right? Remember, when most people go to a car lot and the car salesman comes to them, they usually say, I'm just looking, right? But they're really there to buy a car, right? Why do they say that? Automatic defense mechanism. What are we trying to do? We're trying to pump the brakes, okay? And that's okay, right? We're not going to rush sellers, but we're going to take them down a path that's going to enable them to see our value, to trust us, to give us more information, and to be able to be in a spot where we can truly help them. If you truly understand a seller's real objection, their real concern, now you can make your solution to that seller and offer real value. We're going to use our ears, not our mouth. Now, the first step to overcoming seller objection is to uncover what's really holding them back. Don't expect them to tell you outright. Okay, most sellers, they're not going to tell the truth. They're probably going to be lying to you or holding their cards close to their chest. As a matter of fact, a lot of people who appear to be in that first phase of they're not motivated, a lot of times they're not going to tell you. Okay, so as you go through this system and get better, the right questions and the right movement throughout our 10 steps is going to enable you to flush that out. Now, that's not to say that most people are completely unmotivated, because most sellers that you speak to don't have a problem and are completely unmotivated. This course is designed to teach you how to flush out the ones who aren't being completely truthful with their situation. So here's how to define the seller's true objections. You'll never uncover what's really holding someone back if you don't ask. Never accept the "I want to think about it" response. Okay, take that completely off the table. After they say no, right, or "I've got to think about it," one of the things I like to say is, hey, usually when someone says, "I want to think about it," it usually means one of three things. It means that the price is no good, they don't like the terms, or they don't like me, right? Which one is it? Sometimes I'll also switch out for the terms. Maybe I'll say process, and then I just shut up. Now, it's really, really important here. Your body language is going to be key. If you're face-to-face, I want you to look to the seller. Okay, I want you to, if your arms are crossed, make sure they're uncrossed. Don't be confrontational. And face them face-to-face and look them right in the eye. And just wait. And wait. And wait. And wait. Until you get the answer. Don't be confrontational. Just listen. Shh. Don't be scared of the silence, because usually the answer will come out. Be patient. Ask questions. Now remember, the most common stated objection is the price. But if they object to your offer price, don't start negotiating price right away. This is a big mistake that most wholesalers make. In our office, we have acquisition managers working the phone. And when we do coaching, it's funny, the biggest mistake newbies do is as soon as they get an objection, they come up on price. And I'm like, no, don't do it! Because that's not the real objection. All of a sudden, right, we start negotiating against ourselves. And they're not even, they're raising their price, and they're not even addressing the real objection, right? So this is where we've got to slow it down. So number one, find out if you're in the ballpark, right? So I'll say, hey, look, it sounds like you want to think about it. Are we at least on the ballpark, like on our terms and price? Like what's really going on, right? Is it something I said? Is it the price? What's really going on here, right? If it's a no, that's okay, right? But let me know really what you're thinking so that we can get on the same page. Remember, I'm going to review our commitments. Remember where it talks about set the agenda and reviewing the commitments. I'll always tell them it's okay to say no. I just like to know where we stand. Now, usually they're going to give me an answer of some form, right? And if they don't, I'll say, look, is there anything other than the price? If they stick to their price, hold their guns on their price, I'll say if there's anything other than price holding you up, besides that, right? Is it just price? And this is one of my favorite questions. I'll say if I could change the price, which I'm not saying I can, all right? And there's a good chance I can't. But is there anything else holding up the deal? Now, 9 times out of 10, they're going to give you another objection. Okay, it could be, well, my son's living in the property and I'm not happy, but I at least want to give him 90 days to move, and I haven't spoken to him about the fact that I'm selling the house. Now, that's the real objection. So what you want to do is you want to shelve the price objection. Okay, you want to take that and put it to the side and immediately address the son living in the property objection and focus on that and listen and ask questions and go back to the pain that's associated with that problem. Because most likely, that's the only thing holding them back. Okay, and focus again on the pain and pleasure of them moving on from this agreement. Okay, now you want to slowly work out all the terms of the agreement. Now, once you do this, usually the seller is going to have a sigh of relief. And their guard's going to be down. And now that they shared this with you, it's almost like this weight's going to be lifted off their shoulders because they've been hiding this from you. Or they're almost scared that you're going to tell their son that you're going to sell their property, right? So now that you've said, hey, you'll keep it confidential and you've worked out all the terms, the price objection will usually melt away. Okay, usually melt away. Now, one thing I'll say here is, and this is a great question I'll ask. I'll say, hey, look, now that we've solved this problem with your son, what about the price, right? It sounds like we were too low. What are we going to do about that? So I'll go back and I'll hit that right between the eyes. And I'll say, look, you said we were too low, right? What are we going to do? And usually they'll say, hey, you know what? If you're able to do this, I can sell you the house for this price, right? Maybe I got to come up a little bit, but you know what? That price objection is most likely going to melt away. And that's why it's so important to ask the right questions and define the seller's true objections. Now, I know I'm doing all the talking right now, but the more questions you ask and the less talking and the more listening that you do, the more likely that you're going to be able to do business. Now, another way to flush out more objections, right, is after they offer you that problem, and you say, hey, look, what if I could let your son stay in the property for 90 days after close? And I was the one who was going to deal with them, and I'm going to tell him that you're going to sell the house, right? Is that something that you even consider, or probably not? And I'll hear the objection, and again, that might flush out more objections. All right, moving on. Overcoming objection means moving someone from a place of uncertainty to a place of certainty without breaking rapport. So in that last situation, if someone had a family member living in the property, right, they're uncertain on how they're going to deal, let's say with a son who's been living in the property for 6 years rent-free, right? They don't know how they're going to speak to that person. They don't know how they're going to communicate the fact that they're selling the property. They don't know if that person's going to be kicked out on the street, right? And now they're the worst mother in the world, right? So now that we can take that uncertainty off the table, we now put the person in a mental position to be able to say yes. And so I love addressing the price objection by really, really uncovering what the real problem is. And now it's important not to break rapport. And you do that by looking the seller in the eyes and asking questions and listening. Now, everything you say to a seller from this point forward should be said with the intent of bolstering their certainty that accepting your offer and doing business with you will get them out of the pain and into pleasure, right? So I'm going to go into the fact, you remember the pain and pleasure that we talked about in the first module, right? All the things that you're going to get by increasing your wholesale business, right? And all the pain that will happen if we don't do business. We want to do the same thing here, right? We want to focus on the pleasure of them selling the property and the pain of not doing business, right? The carrot and the stick. Now use the seller's leverage points that you uncovered in step 3. Remember, that was the qualifying step, to raise their level of certainty and influence them to act now. You see how this whole system's now coming together? Okay, you want to reassociate them to their past, present, and future pain and get them thinking about the positive benefits of selling today. Now, one of my favorite questions is going to say, hey, look, if we don't do business today, what's going to change 30 days from now? And then I just listen. All right, now while you're addressing seller objections, you must continuously ask for the order. Okay, otherwise you won't know if what you're doing is actually working or not. So some different ways that you can ask for the order is, hey, what's the next step here? Right? And if we were able to come to price and terms, right, would you be willing to move forward? Right? Or where are we? Right? Are we even in the same ballpark? Right? Because if it is, let's do business. And if it's not a fit, right, then that's okay. Just tell me no. Right? And I use that word, just tell me no, often throughout the conversation to push the seller away. And oftentimes they keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And eventually they sign on the dotted line. Now, I want to teach you something that has worked really, really, really well. And this is something called the feel, felt, found method. And it's almost like a built-in testimonial machines. Now, I agree that you should get your customers to send you testimonials once you buy their property. But this, ironically, is a total ninja trick that we use in our company to really, really get people to understand how to solve objections by using third-party validation. And this, in my opinion, it's a very feel, felt, found method is a very effective method for overcoming objections. Now, it should always be told from a former customer's perspective, so it sounds like a testimonial. Okay, you want to use words like, I understand how you feel, and you want to listen, and this is empathy, right? And you also want to relate almost like I've dealt with this situation many times before and I get it. I get the fact that your son's been living in the property rent-free and you don't want to throw him out on the street. I get it, right? And I get it that you don't want to talk him. Oh my gosh, what a huge, what a huge burden that you have. As a matter of fact, okay, I understand this because I worked with another seller in the exact same situation who had their daughter living in the property, not for 6 months, but actually for 18 years, right? This daughter moved in the property when she was 18 and she was 36 at this time. And she had all this anxiety about telling the daughter to move. And there was guilt and shame. And, you know, the daughter actually had some substance abuse problems and she didn't want to throw her out on the street. Okay. Now, I went out to the house. We had the same conversation like we had just now. We bought the property. We gave the seller, the daughter, 3 months to move after we closed. We actually communicated with them, and the seller found that it was so much easier to let someone else deal with the tenant situation rather than continue to deal with it on her own. And I can tell you that as soon as she sold the house, a huge sigh of relief went over them. And initially, there was some tension between, you know, the daughter and her mom. But you know what? A couple months later, they reconciled and everything was just moving in a positive direction. And they were so glad that they can get out of the situation. And now the mother and daughter have a great relationship. And it was a win-win for everybody. And so you hear how that's a testimonial built into a story. And so you really want to become a master storyteller when you're using the feel, felt, found method. I mean, this is like totally ninja. It works really, really, really well. Again, you want the story told from a former customer's perspective, so it sounds like a testimonial. Now, let's talk about negotiating price with sellers. The number one rule and the number one mistake that rookie wholesalers make, and even experienced wholesalers make, is that they talk too much. They talk too much. And they can't deal with silence, right? The silence is deafening. And so what do I mean by this? It means that whenever you make an offer, if there's any kind of awkward pause or a shift or a funny face by the seller, or the seller throws an objection, they automatically jump in and agree to come up on price. I'm telling you, this is a killer. All right. So what you want to do is when it comes to price, you want to talk as little as possible. What does this mean? It means don't bid against yourself. If you make an offer and the seller says no, you want to shut up and always wait for a counter offer. Now, ideally, I always like the seller. Always, for them to mention a number. Always. And if I can't get a number, I'm always going to go really low, like really low. And I talk about that in some of the recorded calls that we have during some of the role plays. But whenever you have a number, even when you're negotiating, you want to always wait for the counter offer. Here's a great example. I remember one time I was negotiating for a house, and it was in a so-so neighborhood in San Diego. And this was years ago, but maybe 5-6 years ago. And I offered a price, I believe, of $70,000. And the seller says, no, that's way too low. I'm not taking that. And by the way, because I was trying to get a number out of the seller, right? And she wouldn't give it to me. And so I knew that I could pay at least $110,000 on this house, right? And make $10,000 assignment fee. And as we went, I almost said, hey, look, I might be able to do 90, right? But I just, at some point, something just said, Todd, shut up, right? And I just made a funny face. And one of the things I like to do is look really confused, right? Again, this is something I learned from David Finkel when he was coaching real estate, is he used to go, ooh, 70 won't work, huh? And she's like, no, it won't work. And we sat in front of the house. It must have been like at least 60 seconds of silence. Now I can tell you that it felt like it was 5 minutes, but I just sat there and I squirmed and I moved. And she goes, well, if you could come up to $78,000, I'd do the deal today. What? I almost gave away $12,000 by opening my mouth. So it's really, really important to talk as little as possible. Those awkward silences, right? That quiet is actually a very, very, very good sign. What that means is that the seller is thinking in their mind about your offer, and it actually means that you're in the ballpark. And they're actually thinking about probably some of the other aspects of the sale besides the price, right? So that's a very, very good thing. So don't blurt out counter offers. Just sit there and listen. Now, here's something else. You also want to know the comps. Okay, now I don't want you to overanalyze this. In my opinion, you always want to negotiate and negotiate the best price possible. However, when you're dealing with an analytical seller, and you'll know this by them asking a lot of the facts, like asking for comps or how do you come up with that number? How do you calculate the repairs? What are the closing costs going to cost? How does my $200,000 mortgage and my $1,500 back OH fee, how will that affect my actual cash net at closing, right? If they start asking about a lot of details, you know that you're dealing with someone very analytical. So especially with that type of personality, you want to know the comps. Sellers may know what other houses have sold for in the area, so be prepared to discuss your offer in relation to those comps. Of course, you want to have the lowest ones in hand. That's not always possible, but if you can, do it. Again, don't be quick to come up on price. Your biggest jump should be your first counter offer. Okay, then move up slowly for there. Let me tell you a story. I was recently training one of our sales team to buy a house up in northern San Diego, and his initial price, I believe, was $320 on a house. And the seller says, "Hey, I really like you. I trust you, but I have 3 other offers." And so, we knew that but he had offers on the table for $360. He says, "Hey, look, you don't have to be the highest, but you've got to come up." So what Brian did was, instead of jumping to $360, right, he jumped to $340. So now we're $20,000 below the highest offer. And we still knew we had a huge profit margin, but he wasn't scared to lose the deal. And so initially he goes, "No, you're still 20 grand. That's too much." Right? So they went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So 20K, that was the biggest jump. Then Brian had to come up again. Okay. So what he did was he came up $3,000 from $340 to $343, right? A much smaller jump. Okay. Now what you want to do is train the seller that every jump that you do is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. It's also going to create more credibility, right? If you come up 20,000 and then another 20,000 and another 20,000, you're going to start to lose credibility with the seller. So if your increments of price keeps getting smaller and smaller, it looks like you're really sharpening your pencil. So after Brian came up another 3,000, the seller asked for more. Okay, at this time, after we came up $3,000, he came up $123.42. Okay, $123.42. So the offer was $343 and $162.43. So when you come up, you want to maintain credibility and come up as slow as possible. The first jump is always the largest, and always move up very, very slow from there, like molasses, very, very slow. Don't be overly eager. Slow down. Whenever you give up something, this is big. Glad I have my PowerPoints here. It always reminds me of what I want to teach. So whenever you give up something, again, you are training the seller that if they ask for too much, you're always going to ask for something in return. Always. So if they say, "Hey, look, can you make it a 14-day close from a 30? Right? I'll say, "I can do that, but I'm going to need a $2,000 reduction in price because I'm going to have to pay an expedite fee to my lender." Right? And that may be the case. Or whatever is true, use that to your advantage and say, "Hey, look, we're really going to have to hustle the paperwork and move this faster. We need a $2,000 price reduction." If they ask for a $5,000 increase in price, ask for them to throw in the RV in the front yard. If they say, "Hey, look, I want 90 days to move out," right? Great. Ask for a $3,000 a month in rent after the close, right? So you always want to ask for something in return so that they know if they keep negotiating, you're going to ask for something. Now, while you're doing this, you're also making the deal sweeter for you. Now, as you move closer in price, get a verbal commitment from them by saying, look, what if I could give you that price? I'm not saying I can, but what if I can get you X price? Could we do business today? That's my favorite question. That's also going to flush out the other hidden objections. Asking if you could do business today will get everything out on the table, and again, might enable you to do better on the price. Now, here's added leverage for sellers who are stuck on price. Now, you want to do something called mismatching. All right, and I've talked about this before, right? If you're looking for the highest price, why not just list it with a real estate agent, right? I might not be your solution, right? I'm the pawn shop of real estate. I offer fast and quick solutions, and I bet you if you put $15,000 into this thing and you list it with an agent, you get way more. And then I shut up. And now they're going to talk about their pain again. No, I don't want to deal with that. I like you. I'd rather have this done today. Boom, 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 boom. Right? And so I love to do the takeaway, and this is going to really enable me to get the price that I need. Right? Now, always have the seller, if you're on the phone, tell them to grab a sheet of paper with a pencil, or if I'm in front of them, I'm going to have my own sheet of paper, and I'll say, okay, well, let's calculate what this would cost in dollars to list with an agent, including repair costs, insurance, closing costs, commissions, seller concessions. Ask them if the extra amount they'd receive by listing it, would that be worth it, right? And you'll notice that once they start doing the numbers, that listing with an agent really isn't even that sexy, right? Not even that sexy, but even if it's $12,000 difference or $15,000 or $30,000 difference, I ask them, number one, hey, look, is that extra $30,000 worth the time, the energy, and the hassle? Right now, I go back to the pain step. You mentioned that this is affecting your health, that your wife is across the country, that your relationship is deteriorating with your daughter, or that right now you're bleeding 2 mortgage payments. Is this even worth the added stress? So always go back to that pain point and dig, right? The seller isn't budging on price. Now, you also want to test the resolve by using this question. This is also a ninja question. So, Mr. Seller, if I can't give you $300,000, are you telling me that you and I can't do business? And then I just listen. Shh. Then you'll find the answer. And I keep on saying that. So if you're telling me that I can't do 310, are you saying that we can't do business, or 300? Whatever it is. Now remember, you can't lose what you never had. If the seller says they're willing to walk away from the sale, don't be afraid to push them farther in your direction. If the seller has true motivation, they'll come back to you. I'm telling you, if you pull away, you cannot kill a sale. If you tell the seller that you're not sure if there's a fit here, you cannot kill a deal where there's motivation. If the seller says, you know what, I don't need to sell to you, right? You never had a deal in the first place. Yes, you killed it, right? But it was never a deal, right? You killed something that you were never going to get. So don't be afraid to push the seller in the other direction, because all this will do will save you time, energy, and hassle. Now, you can also use a stealth mismatch to take away the sale and really, really test their resolve. So let's say the seller says, hey, look, your offer is too low. I think I'll just continue to rent it out. So what I'll do at this point, and I recommend that you do, is I'll say, hey, look, you're probably right. I think you should hang on to it. After all, it sounds like you might have good tenants and they take good care of the property for you and they pay on time. This is not a bad deal for you. Right now, it's very important not to have a very passive aggressive tone here, right? You want to use this and almost say, hey, look, that I could understand why you'd feel that way. You don't want to say it sarcastically. It's very important that you watch your tone and really use something that I call a cushion, right? So if you say it like, yeah, you're probably right. I think you should hang on to it. After all, you have great tenants and I'm sure they pay on time, right? You don't want to say that. Right? Again, you want to use something a little cushion, change your language and say, hey, look, it sounds like you've got great tenants. They're paying on time every single month. You want a higher price. I get it, right? I might not be the best solution, right? And then all of a sudden to say, well, actually, they haven't paid on time. Boom! Now you got them, right? If they say, no, actually, they have paid on time. They're great tenants. I wouldn't mind keeping them. Well, guess what? Get off the phone. Get the heck out of there. If you want to send them a written offer, do it. But there are bigger fish to fry and another $50,000 wholesale deal waiting for you someplace else. All right, so at what point do you stop closing closing, excuse me. Remember, your goal is to uncover the seller's real objection and to overcome it without breaking rapport. Remember, you're making a friend. You want to stay at that level 3 rapport. Listen for these cues from the seller that indicate you're starting to do more harm than good, all right? These are the key indicators that it's time to back off, okay? If they change in tone, the seller goes from sounding polite to aggravated. Now, if the seller keeps repeating the same objection over and over again, regardless of your repeated attempts to overcome it, right? We're obviously not hitting that objection. Now, I love to use a verbal commitment for sellers who need to talk to a third party or insist on having more time to consider your offer, okay? And this goes back to pushing the sale forward. If I'm not going to get the sale today, that's okay. I'm okay with that. But what I'm not okay is this wishy-washy, I'm wasting time, I have no idea when we're going to be doing business, and I want you to waste time with me. I can't stand that, and that's really going to kill you. So if you can't close them right then and there, here are some rules. Number one, you want to agree on what's going to happen next. You want to get another commitment. You want to push that sale forward. Let's say they have to talk to their sister or brother, get a time and date on what has to happen. Number two, if they have to think about it, ask how long they need to think about it. And again, what I'm going to do is say, hey, look, I need you to think about it. At this point, though, on Tuesday at 4 p.m., can you commit to giving me a yes or a no? And I want to let you know, no is perfectly okay. Finally, and this is where most people drop the ball, set an appointment to speak afterwards. And for me, I really put the screws on, right? So I'll say, hey, look, Mr. Seller, why don't we speak on Friday at 3 p.m.? I will show up right on time. Is there anything that I need to do between now and then to answer any of your questions? Great. Okay. So I'll speak to you 3 p.m. I'll be right on time, and I'll see you then. Boom. So I'll put it on my calendar, and it's really important. Okay. Very, 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 very important. When you call that seller back, and every point in the sales process, don't call at 2:59. Don't call at 3:01. Call at 3 o'clock, 3:00. Do exactly what you say, okay? And also say what you're going to do, because every step of the way, this is the chance for you to build credibility, keep a promise, build trust, okay? And do what you say you're going to do. Imagine that you're dealing with a seller, and we just did this, right? We've been working a deal for 2 years, right? And I looked in our customer relationship manager, and we've had 24 conversations with a seller. And every single time I see appointments that we made and how we were on time for every single one and kept commitments. We didn't get the deal right away, but guess what? We're closing it this week, and it's going to be a $30,000 assignment, right? And that's pretty much all profit because that marketing money was spent almost 2 years ago, right? How cool is that? And so remember, keep your word, use the system, and your bank account is going to explode. Now, once the seller agrees to accept your offer, this is a part of the getting closed. We call it get closed because you're having the seller close you, not the other way around. So I love to say, hey, what would you like to do now? Or what's the next step? You want the idea to start the paperwork to come from the seller. As soon as you bust out that paperwork, they're going to start to have that anxiety, right? So one thing I used to do when I used to meet with sellers is I used to actually leave my paperwork in the car, and I'll say, hey, great, I'll go out to my car and get the paperwork if that's what you want to do. And that used to take off all the stress and all the anxiety. If you're doing a deal over the telephone, I'll say, okay, great. So what's the next step? And they say, I don't know. How do you get the paperwork to me? Well, I'll say, hey, look, we have concierge service. And this is another way I close. We have concierge service. So what we can do is actually send out a notary out to you to bring the paperwork over. It's a third party, and you'll sign it, and then they'll send it over to escrow. They'll make it really, really, really easy on you. Is that something that you'd like to do right now? And then they say yes. And I'll say, okay, great. Does a 3 o'clock or a 5 o'clock tomorrow work for you? Notice we leave a window of a time they pick one or the other, but it was their idea to start the paperwork. That's really important. Now, you want to always use the boomerang technique to seal the deal. Remember, the harder you throw a boomerang, the harder it's going to come back. Now, this does two things. Number one is that it tells me the seller's true commitment. But number two, it tells me that I don't want to call tomorrow saying they changed their mind. So I throw the deal away as fast as possible. So say, Mr. Seller, are you sure this is something that you want to do? And I'll say, just remind me, all the benefits. And so they'll say, yeah, this is a relief. And finally I'll have this done. And it's just been too long. And man, really she needs to go. My daughter living in the property rent-free for 6 months. And so they reaffirm all the decisions. They'll say, great, I'll bust out the paperwork. And again, use the boomerang. It works every single time. All right. And the words that you can use for the boomerang is, are you sure this is something that you want to do? Hey, I just want to make sure this is a win for you. Or Mr. Seller, I hear some hesitation in your voice, right? Why am I getting that? And now it's going to flush out any additional objections, or it's going to seal the deal. Okay. And this is a lot of fun. So don't be scared to use the boomerang. All right, so those are the 10 steps to the no limits sales system. Now, one thing I want to remind you is that it's okay to weave in and out of the steps. Remember, you're not a robot, right? And this is not necessarily a script. And everyone's going to say it a little bit differently, but you also want to use the 5 principles, okay, the 5 communication styles of the 5 communication secrets, of the no limits selling system. But go through the 10 steps, right? Don't skip them. If you've got to go back, that's okay, right? But if you do this and you commit to this, it's going to take some practice. You're going to see your assignment fees soar through the roof, all right? I'm really, really excited for the next module, so let's gear up. Also, don't forget to print out a copy of the 10 steps, put them on your wall, practice them, visualize them, and as you talk to a seller, you can also view that to help you do more deals on the telephone. So I'm really excited, and I'll talk to you on the next video.